Hi, I'm Mark from An American in Russia. People love to paint Russia and America as total opposites. But after 24 years of living here, I've got a different take. Turns out, Russia and America are more alike than they'd ever admit, especially to each other. From railroads to revolutions, family values to frontier spirit, we've been walking strangely parallel paths. In the late 1700s, the U.S. was a newborn republic. Russia, under Catherine the Great, was an imperial heavyweight, focused more on Europe and the Ottomans, meaning like Turkey, than anything across the Atlantic. But there was no hostility. In fact, by 1809, formal diplomatic relations were established. And get this, the first U.S. ambassador to Russia? John Quincy Adams, who would later become president. Russia and the U.S. developed a strong commercial relationship, trading in furs, naval stores, and other goods. In the Monroe Doctrine era, about 1823, when America told Europe to keep their hands off the Western Hemisphere, Russia actually agreed. They had claims in the Pacific Northwest. Hell, they even had a fort in what is now San Francisco. But they signed the Treaty of 1824, polling back to what we now call Alaska. Mid-1800s, despite wildly different political systems, one autocratic, one democratic, the two giants maintained friendly, even sympathetic relations. They were both expanding. They were both suspicious of Europe, and they mostly left each other alone. During various European revolutions, the U.S. viewed Russia as a stabilizing force, even though they weren't democratic, and Russia viewed the U.S. as a relatively friendly Western power. But beyond diplomacy, check out these timelines. In terms of serfdom and slavery, Russia abolished serfdom in 1861 under Tsar Alexander II. America followed with the Emancipation Proclamation by Abraham Lincoln in 1863, abolishing slavery. Two massive countries, both freeing their underclass in the same decade and both dealing with the aftermath for generations to come. They came from different ideologies, but both concluded that forced labor was holding them back, morally and economically. A short side note, in America, there was no slavery in the North, only in the South. Because of this, the North was more advanced technologically, more industrialized, and more efficient than the South was. Transcontinental railroads. Well, Russia is 17 million square kilometers. America, nearly 10 million square kilometers. The U.S. completed its transcontinental railroad in 1869. Russia extended the Trans-Siberian Railway from Moscow to Chelyabinsk by 1892 and later all the way to Vladivostok. Forget the dates. Both countries were laying down tracks against impossible landscapes, just in opposite directions, because they both were expanding. In terms of civil strife, the U.S. fought a brutal civil war and then went through Reconstruction. Russia endured the 1917 Revolution and Civil War. Each country tore itself apart, one over freedom, the other over ideology, and both had to stitch themselves back together under new visions. Let's leave the textbooks and get into real life. I've been watching both countries up close for 24 years, and honestly, they feel like distant cousins. far as patriotism, I grew up a patriot. I moved to a country full of patriots. Different flags, but the same pride. Early on, Russians used to ask me, who won World War II? And I mean, they asked me a lot, a real lot. I'd say the Allies, meaning the US, Russia, Britain, Canada, Australia. But many Russians thought Americans believed they won it alone, which isn't true, but not surprising either, since during Soviet times, the actual death toll here was kept a national secret. Nobody in the world knew. And it was staggering, 26 million people. Every Russian family was affected. Second most common question I got, do you think America really landed on the moon? I swear, half of Russia still thinks it was staged. But the head of the Soviet space program believed it, so case closed. Anyhow, this was not an argument I could win. You can't prove or disprove a conspiracy theory. That's what makes it a conspiracy theory. I will say that I 100% know that Americans landed on the moon. We beat you. We were number one. And actually, we're the only country which has done this. So yeah, booyah.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
By the way, I just know in the comments there will be golden nuggets of irrefutable proof that the moon landing was staged. I'll tell you right now, I won't even justify these with a response, so please don't fool yourself into believing that silence shows agreement. I just can't be bothered to respond to these. Let's talk about national exceptionalism. Both countries believe they have something unique, even necessary, to offer the world. But if we're both right, someone's got to be wrong. So naturally, we assume it's the other guy. In terms of humor, Americans have usually kind of dry, sarcastic humor, blunt humor. Russians, it's more ironic, fatalistic, self-deprecating. But we both use humor to deal with hard stuff. Russians just do it with more vodka. Now, as far as faith as an identity, in the U.S., Christianity is woven into the culture. It's in our founding documents. In Russia, orthodoxy runs deep, even among the non-religious. In terms of hardship as a virtue, Americans admire the self-made man. Russians admire the one who suffers and keeps going. But we both admire this virtue. In terms of frontier mindset, or frontier expansion, for that case, the U.S. pushed west. Russia pushed east into Siberia. Both looked at vast empty land and said, let's build something. Independence and practicality. Don't tell an American what to do, and don't tell a Russian either. In terms of love of big things, big land, big personalities, big projects, neither country does subtle. We both build big, dream big, fail big, but we always go big. Some of the differences that actually explain the similarities are, well, geography breeds personality. When your winters are minus 30 and your neighbors are wolves, you either get tough or you don't make it. And isolation equals self-reliance. Both countries grew up believing they didn't need the rest of the world, and to some extent they still act like it. Hell, look at the current events and tell me I'm wrong. Media tends to draw us as so different. I mean, you'd think we were enemies if you just watched the news. But get off the screen and into real life and it's a different picture. We're not enemies. You know, after 24 years, I've come to feel closer to Russians than I ever did to Europeans, not because we're the same, but because we understand struggle, pride, and stubbornness the same way. We're like two brothers who fought for years, but deep down, we have the same heart. What unexpected similarities have you noticed between two cultures? I'd love to hear your stories. Well, until next time, Пока.